Welcome back, and yeah, sorry for the glare. Again, this is going to be another installment for my YouTube channel, Approaching Target. Something I don't necessarily manage very much right now. Um, Long story short, but I just have a chance. It's a nice enough day out today that the kids first getting their bikes out for the season. So while they're out and I'm in here kind of keeping track of them. Um, there's some things in the industry, performance industry, that are starting to shake the world. Now, in the previous video, I mentioned Two Hacks Garage and the automotive backgrounds and so on and so forth. I don't want to get into that. Okay, I posted that stuff. Guys, they don't really. They keep going along with the fads and the common thing that are going on. Today's video is gonna be more about firearms. So if you are a bench shooter, precision shooter, hand loader, hunter, this video is going to be pertaining more to some subjects that you might be interested in. Now, it's not about the coatings that's being used on the firearms themselves. In previous videos, I had shared the different metallurgy of the barrels, the difference between what we used to practice within the fire industry as far as barrel makeup to what the hammer forging is now, to the actual projectiles, the cases, the seating depth, so on and so forth. Now, over the last 6 months, there's been a cartridge that has been introduced to the firearms industry that has existed for a long time, but it was only kind of the hand loaders that were willing to push the envelope were aware of. So the debate between your hunting calibers, whether it be a 223 up to a 300, or the 6 millimeters to the 300, sorry, distracted by the kids. 300 caliber variations are coming out now with shorter actions, longer projectiles. I follow along with some of the YouTube channels like Backfire, Ron Spomer Outdoors, Demolition Ranch that has now shut down. For years, at least 10 years, I've been kind of paying attention to those channels, learning more about what's common within the firearms industry, introduction of new calibers, so on and so forth. And I'm one of those individuals that I grew up using multiple different calibers, and I had experience of how they performed in the wilderness. Each and every year, I use a different caliber, starting out with the Ruger 44 to 30-06s, 35s, the 35 Wellens, 270s, 243s, so on and so forth. All those lower recoil type setups in hunting situations. When I got into the military, obviously the M16A3 at the time was the weapon of choice, and then we converted over to the A4. Even the military has reorganized around the 6.8 Western cartridge. It's still that shorter action, but it's a larger caliber, obviously going from that 223 or 224 diameter caliber, 22 caliber, to the 6.8 millimeter or equivalent 270 projectile diameter. Now, it just happens, some of these channels, they kind of contradict themselves because they're promoting their sponsors for their channels. All YouTube channels that are, monetized, they look for sponsors and they will adjust their content determining who is sponsoring them. Obviously, they got to please the money portion of it before they can carry out these tests. Now, I think it was 2 episodes ago from Backfire, they actually shared the difference in impact of the 30 caliber projectiles compared to the smaller 22 and 24. Okay, now they're getting to the point where if you had to pick one cartridge to dominate everything or something that's not common, they talk about the 280 Ackley Improved. Now with the introduction of the 7 millimeter backcountry, the steel case can be loaded with a hotter load, pushing chamber pressures from that 60,000 psi range up to 80,000 psi range. Now, for any of you hand loaders out there, you probably have already done that. So what is being practiced and becoming more common within the rifle industry, you already knew it, okay? You would take your SAMI specs and you might cheat it up just a little bit. You know, if SAMI specs, we're going to put this in at 62,000 PSI, you might load it to approximately 65,000 PSI. Okay, you know the benefits of additional powder, so on and so forth. Now, with the 6.8 Western being a military caliber, there should be no shortage of brass or on-the-shelf consumer access to that caliber. It should be the #1 produced caliber out of all the manufacturers. It doesn't matter if it's Federal, Remington, they should be all on top of that, producing that round. Now, going back to backfire and Ron Spomer, they've all covered it. Once again, all of them are kind of combined with the content that they show on their channels. As a hand loader, I've been aware of these performance upgrades for a long time. And most of it's been based around the 30-06. So the larger 30 caliber projectile and the longer 30-06 action, you can downgrade, you can always lower the chamber pressure to reduce the recoil or to use a lighter projectile, such as a saber round in the 223 caliber. You can still push those at 4,000 feet per second with a small or lower charge. On the opposite of the spectrum, the 30-06 case can be manipulated and hand loaded for just about every caliber less than 30. Okay, so even a 17, if you can get sable casings that will hold a 17 HMR, you can even load a 17 into a 30-06 case and reduce the power load or change the aggressiveness of the powder to where it's only achieving 1,800 feet per second. The case is the limit of what you can do. Now, with the practice with the 7mm backcountry, the steel case being able to be more resistant to those higher pressures, you can take the same heavier bullets, and instead of getting that 2,800 feet per second, you can push them up to close or over 4,000 feet per second. So the trajectory and performance of all the calibers is about to change, because now you can take even smaller cases like a 300 Blackout, which uses a much larger, or even the 338. You can use the 38 caliber projectile in a very short case, and the overall length is similar to the AR platform. Now, typically your 338 or even 300 Blackouts, they're known for short action, subsonic performance with a very heavy bullet that when it hits the target, the weight of the projectile carries it through. So the penetration is very good. Same with like the 350 Legend or the 400 Bushmaster. It's the weight of the bullet that carries it through. It's not necessarily the speed and the release of energy on impact. With what hand loaders have been practicing for at least 20 years and what is now being introduced into the rifle industry within the backcountry powder, you can increase pressures tremendously. Now again, some of the restriction is in the case, whether it's the diameter of the projectile that will fit in the case or the powder capacity that the case can fit. Now, as I believe it's Federal that's creating the 7mm backcountry. No, sorry, I got that wrong. Now I'm trying to blink here. It's not Federal. But they have created a steel case that has been produced by Winchester for 15 years in the 30-06 300 caliber families. You could buy the thicker copper casings that had a nickel coating on them, giving them the same strength as what the 7mm backcountry steel cases are. So hand loading, you could jump them up quite a bit within chamber pressures and get the faster performance and use heavier projectiles. So you could get the penetration, the release of energy and impact from the speed, and then you can start downgrading in the weight of the bullet to get a flatter trajectory. So you could use a 30-06 with the nickel coated thicker brass castings, and you could push it to 80,000 psi. And pretty much every 30-06 platform that was designed, with the older style barrels, you could achieve 3,500 feet per second with a projectile of the same size, so very good and very high bullet coefficiency as, say, the 270 or 6.5 millimeter in that 30-06 casings. It came down to the aggressive powder load. Okay, so the speed that it burns, increasing the pressure within the chamber before the projectile actually starts passing through. Now, my projection right now, because of this technology making it into the 7mm backcountry category, that powder and that steel case idea is going to find its way into much smaller variations, or shorter, let me say shorter variations of calibers, like the 338. So if you take a 338 or even the 300 Blackout, create a steel case, load it with the same kind of powder that's in the 7mm backcountry, and you're going to have a small package with a very large projectile that can go down range at over 3,000 feet per second, and it will fit in a standard AR platform. You're not going to have a long barrel or long rifle bolt action for accuracy or performance. You're going to be able to get it out of a standard AR platform. So with all the different changes that are going on within the firearms industry, there have been so many variations of calibers for the hunters themselves to precisely pick a caliber to fit a purpose, whether it be coyote hunting, long distance bench shooting, to large American game such as elk or moose, to black bear. And in order to fulfill all of those gaps within the performance, you had to buy the caliber that precisely fit that. Now, with what we've learned through the 7mm backcountry, we're going to be able to shrink down the size of the package, the case, to the point where even our military is starting to catch on. Okay, so while the military has gone from that 223 or 5.56 up to the 6.8 millimeter, they're also going to start using steel. And I'm going to explain why in just a moment. Yes? What do you need? You want hers? It's too tall for you. You can't even reach pedals. Just wait. Let me finish this. All right, going back to the 6.8. Now, the reason why steel is going to become more popular within case development is what's happening in politics right now. Realizing that America does do a lot of trade for copper and brass, and more of that is coming in from our foreign neighbors within that production. But here in the United States, one of the things that the president has mentioned is that he wants to increase steel manufacturing. So, with the information that we have been given to this point, we know that the 7mm is already being produced with a steel case. Hand loaders have been accessing those thicker brass castings with a nickel coating and increasing chamber pressures. Again, they're all in that 30 caliber kind of category. With the powder advances and the steel cases, steel manufacturing being increased here with the United States, these these combinations can be contributed to the smaller cases. So you're going to be able to get more performance in a smaller package while sending a larger diameter projectile downrange with a flatter trajectory and more energy on impact. Now that doesn't even get into the projectile designs and engineering. Whether they're core lock type systems or solid copper projectiles, they can manipulate the performance on impact. Again, those materials are starting to become in higher demand and less access to. But steel and carbon or cast iron is something that we readily still have here with the United States. So with those materials, we're also going to be able to take that shorter package with a steel case, the faster powder load, as in the backcountry is using, increase chamber pressures to approximately 80 to even 100,000 psi chamber pressures. We can start using steel or other materials that we do have access here in the United States into our projectiles. The firearms industry is taking baby steps with introductions to see what catches on. One of the manufacturers, I don't know who it's going to be, it's probably going to be Browning. Browning is going to adapt that technology, the smaller package, powder, and steel casings, into shorter, higher twist rate AR platforms, and they're going to come out with something that can match the performance of every caliber that's available to the public right now. And if they take the next step into re-engineering the actual projectiles, getting away from that softer copper, they're going to be able to use other materials like aluminum, tungsten, or steel. That is going to change the entire firearm industry, from rifles to pistols, from varmint to large game calibers. It's going to change everything. So hand loaders have had a introduction education when it comes to performance within different calibers. The mass manufacturers are starting to introduce these calibers slowly, and with the military push that we have right now of growing our military, the demand for 6.8 Western is also going to increase. The population of the United States needs to start realizing that we are and have been on the brink of war, whether that's a threat as a civil war over elections to now world wars, what's going on within politics around the world. You need to start looking at the calibers that you are using, what's easily available or accessible to get, and the performance from it. You're not, if, you know, I hate to use this terminology, but if shit hits the fan, you are not going to be able to grab every caliber that might be in your safe and carry it with you to go get a job done. You're going to have to narrow it down to the ones that can do it all, and the things that you're going to be able to find in high amounts at the different stores. So over the last 4 years, when we had an ammo shortage, what calibers still remain on the shelf? Okay, 9mm was gone, 30-06 was gone. The military cartridges produced in high numbers were even gone off the shelves. It was the rare casings, things that weren't really long range or military grade calibers, still remain on the shelf. Now, with all this push going on, or excuse me, not push, but with all this technology coming out, who's to say we don't have calibers as small as 22, like the 22 LR, also being loaded with a steel case with that higher efficiency burn rate, higher chamber pressures behind a 22. and the solid lead or copper coated lead being changed into a harder material such as aluminum or a aluminum tungsten steel tipped, who's to say we couldn't use a 22 long rifle for hunting elk? Because again, we could be, we could be launching these projectiles at over 3,500 feet per second, and the combination of the aluminum or different material projectiles, they can control the expansion rate to the point where it expands much wider than your typical 30 caliber. Okay, there's enough material there to really open up. So the industry in the firearms arena is on the brink of a complete evolutionary change. While some individuals are still concentrating on that 50-year-old technology within the automotive performance to gain interest, or if you are a precision shooter, everything is changing. Now, while these other YouTube channels are Ron Spomer and now Backfire and even Hootie Hoo out of the South, out of Tennessee, they're all focused in that 30-06 to that 280 Ackley Improve, or the 27 caliber family. Realize that we can get the same performance now even out of the 22 or even 17 caliber families with the use of different materials and the advancement within black powder. Okay, so again, it's a second video for today. So you can tell my hands are kind of tied to be able to do some stuff here, but you can learn so much about a topic, and those same mechanical sciences will transfer over in between them. So if you're somebody that's really good with cars, you would be really good at firearms, and vice versa. If you're really good with firearms, you're probably going to understand and be very good about building mechanical devices such as cars, knowing those differences in chamber pressure and the performance of the mechanics of the entire package. Can you get more performance out of a smaller package? That's the entire automobile industry completely. It's always been about getting the most amount of power into the smallest amount of package for efficiency, so on and so forth. So with that, it's a different video. I gotta start cleaning up my garage. It's almost race season. The race car has been in the garage for a couple weeks now since ice racing. I gotta convert it over to get it ready for dry racing. So few changes. I did very good this year at the Merrill Ice Drags. I took second overall within my class, which is small block V8, two-wheel drive, no power adders. So second place ain't too bad for a first season using a car. That's designed to do multiple races. We did not get to do any of the oval racing on ice this year with it. And I did crash it on the last run. So I got some body work to do and some repainting. But that is planned on getting to the tracks here in Wisconsin sometime throughout the summer, depending on how projects go, so on and so forth. It's going to be a very busy summer. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Have a good one.